Hi there, I'm Joe Bassett. I am the president and CEO of Dawn Equipment and our subsidiary brand Underground Agriculture, which is what you're seeing on this side of the booth right here. So the Underground Agriculture brand is basically about an alternative approach to farming, where the general kind of philosophy and the thesis is that soil health is the kind of center point and focus of sustainable profitability for farmers, and that, you know, it's a different look at agricultural technology. On the Dawn Equipment side of the business, as we move into kind of greater digitization and automation in our product lines, with the Underground Agriculture side of the business, we're saying, okay, how do we make farmers the most money and then work backwards from there? And maybe it's actually possible to get to maximization of profitability in a different way through absolute input cost minimization. And so a couple years ago, you know, we came out with the ZRX cover crop roller crimper, which works great, and it allows farmers to plant into very tall stands of cover crops, get a great result, get good seed to soil contact. And then we kind of started realizing, you know, okay, we've got this product that works great, but our biggest problem is not necessarily planting into it, it's getting the cover crop stand established. So then we said, okay, well, there's another piece of the puzzle we need to solve. So then we came out with the Duo seed, okay? Very, very low cost, high quality drill opener for interseeding cover crops. And here you see a complete interseeder, Duo seed interseeder, where you've got 2 rows going between existing rows of cash crops right there. Maximum value at the lowest possible cost. And we said, okay, so we need to have an interseeder solution to empower our end users to establish their cover crop stands earlier, because, you know, really to make this system work, where we're using cover crops as your primary mode of weed control, you need to have a really tall stand. For us, if you're letting your cover crop get 6-8 inches tall in the spring and then terminate it, that's not our wheelhouse. That's not. We're looking for people that are using cover crops to control weeds, but also increasingly to possibly provide the majority of your nitrogen and other kind of nutrients that the plant needs. So, all right. So then we get to the interseeding, and we said, okay, now we're working on stand establishment of cover crops. What's the next hurdle, right? Well, if you look at like this right here, this cereal rye cover crop is a very, very good mechanism to control weeds. But in the real world, outside of research, it's never going to be 100% solution. So if you're going to increase adoption, you need to have something that works reliably, you know, year after year across a wide variety of conditions, even when things don't go right, because they definitely won't go right all the time. That's the one thing we know about planting green, is that it won't always go right. So then we come back and we say, okay, and this idea actually dates back a while ago. We said, all right, inevitably you will have some sort of weeds kind of growing up through, you'll have some sort of other solution. And when I go back to how do I make the most amount of money per acre, that's where we've become very interested in organic no-till, right? How do you get the absolute most, and specifically soybeans, okay? How do you get the absolute maximum dollar value out with the absolute minimum input? You do organic no-till soybeans. You plant them into a cereal rye cover crop, and we can make this work, okay? And then every once in a while you get a weed escape, or, you know, it comes in from the side of the road, or it starts infecting your field like a disease. What do? You go in there and hand pick them? Well, the RowMow idea is where that came from, where it's like, okay, you've got a weed problem, you know, that's a local specific area of the field or something like that. It's something you can go in and just mechanically cut weeds out. And our first design that we made last year was actually looked different. It was like a flail, and it had a guard that ran around and deflected the beans around the outside, and then it would cut between the rows. The RowMow idea is a deceptively simple engineering problem. Because it's actually power management is very hard, because you can get into some of these cover crops that are thick, dense materials that really take a lot of power to cut through. So This is a device that mows between the rows and then has an adjustable height cutter that mows above the row, right? So your bean row is going to be right here. It's going to be a guard device where it'll push those beans around the outside, trim material that's in between the rows, but then also any weeds that are coming up above the height of the plant, you can adjust the height of this. So this is obviously the proof of concept design, which worked fairly well when we ran it. It needs to evolve a lot. We are going to be running this with several cooperators this year. We're going to be running this with the University of Wisconsin, a couple independent farmers who are also interested in doing, basically living mulch cover crop systems, which is the next step too for the RowMow, where, okay, you're growing a legume cover crop and then basically not terminating it, planting the corn directly into it, and kind of using the RowMow to successively cut back and mulch that legume and then direct. There's some cool intellectual property associated with directing that trimmed material back around the root zone of the plant. And so, the cool thing that I think we have right here is we can make organic no-till soybeans a practical reality for a lot of people, right? And our gamble is that when you run that ledger, your cost in versus money out, right? That is the way you make the most amount of money farming. It takes a little bit more management, right? This could also be a vehicle where you could take that farm in the 300, 500 acre area that maybe is going to be washed over by the wave of automation that's going to come to agriculture, and say, okay, how can you use a higher management, very high profitability system, which is kind of positioned well for small to medium sized farms too. So we don't know. We're just going to kind of start walking one direction and then see where it goes. But the number one thing we know is that if the farmers and the customers make more money, it's going to work. And that if we're relying on subsidies, and I don't believe the government should be in the cover crop business. I don't think paying farmers to plant cover crops, it's completely pointless. It doesn't create long-term adoption. The only thing that's going to work is taking an engineering approach and developing like every piece of the puzzle that's needed to make it work. The reason why people have, there's like technical problems to deal with. And that's our kind of sweet spot. So anyways, thanks for the time. Lassiter Media, as always.